Are there some things you don't know about the Herod of the Bible? The Herod who tried to have Jesus killed soon after he was born? The one who had John the Baptist's head put on a platter? The Herod who has a say in whether or not Jesus is crucified? Herod is such an important figure in the Gospels. But are there some things that we don't really know about him? Things that we need to understand when we are reading the Gospels? Things that have the potential to dramatically change the way we read the Bible? Well, if you want to learn what those things are and why they matter so much, then join me as we explore the truth about Herod. But first, if you love learning insights about the Bible and want to see connections between shows like The Chosen and the Bible that will transform the way you read Scripture, then click the link above and down in the description where you can download my free resource called 7 Biblical Secrets Hidden in The Chosen. This will show you connections to Scripture and the first century world of Jesus that are present in the show, but most people don't notice. We've packed a whole lot of information into a really small package, just like this video. Speaking of, let's dive in. The first thing you need to know in order to understand the Herod of the Bible is that there is actually more than one Herod in the Bible. Now, you may already know this, but the truth is it can be hard to keep all of the different Herods straight. Herod the Great is the most powerful and famous of all the Herods. He is the man who reigned over most of Israel for almost 40 years. He instituted massive building projects, garnered incredible wealth, and most infamously, tried to have Jesus killed when the Magi told him that they were looking for the newborn king. But Herod also had descendants, some of whom appear even more prominently in the Bible. Herod Archelaus is the Herod who rises to power after the Herod the Great's death and causes Jesus and his family to flee to Egypt. Herod Agrippa appears in the book of Acts and is eaten by worms when he fails to give praise to God. And Herod Antipas is the Herod who appears in most of the stories involving Jesus, the one who ruled over the region of Galilee and ultimately ordered John the Baptist's execution. Now, all in all, the Herods were a significant presence in the Holy Land at the time of Jesus. But there is one thing that they were not. The Herods were not kings. At least, not all of them. Herod the Great is really the only one of the Herods who could truly claim this title. He enjoyed relative autonomy over Israel for several decades, and he controlled territory that extends even beyond the borders of Israel today. But after the death of Herod the Great, everything changed. Since it was Rome who allowed Herod to control this region in the first place, it was also Rome who decided what would happen to Herod's land after his death. And ultimately, what they decided was to divide Herod's land up amongst his sons. Archelaus, Antipas, and Philip were each given control over different regions of Israel. They were officially called tetrarchs, a title given to them by Rome to reflect their control over their territory, but also their diminished status. They were allowed to rule, but they were not kings like their father. This change, however, was not entirely clear throughout all of Israel. In Matthew's Gospel, we see the use of the word tetrarch to describe Herod Antipas, but in Mark's Gospel, he's referred to as a king. And this is because while Rome may have changed his title, king was still how the public perceived him, the descendant of his father, a long-standing king of Israel. And yet, while these men might have been called kings of Israel, there were many who did not believe that they were true kings, and for good reason. You see, the third thing that you might not know about the Herods is that they were not exactly Jewish. And that's because about 100 years before Jesus, during the Hasmonean dynasty, which was the last time that the Jewish people really had control of the Holy Land, the Jewish leader, John Hyrcanus, conquered the region of Idumea in southern Israel. And many people in that region converted to Judaism. Now, among these converts was Herod the Great's family. So once Herod rose to power, in order to make himself a more legitimate-looking Jewish king, Herod the Great had his court historian invent a Jewish ancestry for his family that would date all the way back to the Babylonian exile. And while this did earn him goodwill during portions of his reign, in the end, most were not fooled, and his true heritage came to light. They didn't consider Herod and his descendants to be true kings of Israel. They were not from the line of David. They came to power by supporting those who oppressed Israel. In fact, this is connected to much of the messianic fervor that existed at the time of Jesus. People were tired of false kings. They were longing for the true king of Israel, the son of David, God's promised Messiah. But a flawed lineage wasn't the only reason people couldn't accept the Herods as kings. It wasn't just a matter of them not being ethnically Jewish. They weren't even religiously Jewish. You see, another thing you might not know about the Herods is that they had deep connections to emperor worship and pagan worship. Now, Herod the Great is complicated, as he is the man almost solely responsible for building and expanding the Second Temple, the very same temple that Jesus and his disciples worshiped in throughout their lives. But he's also responsible for Caesarea Maritima, a seaside city that was filled with pagan rituals and was named in honor and worship of the emperor Caesar. In the same way, Herod's son, Antipas, is responsible for the city of Tiberias, a city also named after the emperor, in this case Tiberius, but also a city that was built atop a Jewish burial ground, meaning that no faithful Jewish person would ever be able to step foot into the city. And then there's Herod Philip, who's responsible for the city of Caesarea Philippi, a place not only devoted to the worship of the emperor, but also the site of the world's largest temple to the god Pan, a place filled with all kinds of lewd rituals and debauchery, a place of child sacrifice that no faithful Jew would ever visit. These are the types of men who could never faithfully lead the people of Israel. They might have power given to them by Rome, but they would never have the acceptance of the people. In fact, this leads to one of the most significant moments in the Gospels, a moment that profoundly impacted Jesus' life, the death of John the Baptist. A moment that highlights another dark side of the Herods, which is that in Mark's Gospel, Mark tells us about the animosity that exists between John the Baptist and Herod Antipas. Animosity that stems from a charge John levels against Herod, saying, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." But the question is, what exactly does Herod do that's unlawful? Well, when Mark refers to Herod's brother's wife, he's referring to Herodias, the wife of Herod's brother Philip. But that's not the only problem here, because not only is Herodias already married, so is Herod. So for Herod to marry Herodias, not only must he divorce his wife, and not only must Herodias leave her husband, causing both of them to commit adultery. Additionally, Herodias is his niece, the daughter of his brother Aristobulus. And then finally, this betrayal will ultimately lead to armed conflict between Herod's armies and the armies of his former wife's father, Aretas, costing innocent people their lives. You see, this is a moral disaster on many levels. It will harm people far beyond those involved. And it highlights the immorality and vulnerability of the Herods. These are men who are not rightfully in power. They're trying to lead a religious nation whose religion they don't practice. They're sinful and depraved, caring little for the harm that their actions cause others. And ultimately, they are bound to come into conflict not only with men like John the Baptist, but also with Jesus. For Jesus is the king that they will never be. He is the true son of David, the one that people will ultimately look to for salvation. And in the end, while the dynasty of Herod will die out after a few generations, the kingdom Jesus builds will last for eternity and will spread to the ends of the earth. Now, before you go, if you haven't done it yet, click the link above and down in the description to download the free resource, 7 Biblical Secrets Hidden in The Chosen. And if you'd like to see even more videos breaking down episodes of The Chosen, then just click this link right here. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.